Before we go into what happens to us when we die, we have to understand who we are. The best analogy that I can provide in terms of understanding who we are, right? Because I look at you and I see Ben, you look at me, it's Adam, and these are our physical bodies on the earth plane, and we're trained to see each other that way, but that's not really who we are.
That we're a three-part being. You know, we all have a body. Yeah. You know, we all have a soul. That's our mind, our will, and our emotions. Yeah, what we think, what we feel, what we experience, but it's the real you, the spirit, that goes on.
So the physical body, you know, it decays, it deteriorates, it does everything we think it does if you think that it's sort of ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I think whatever happens to us, to our soul, to our spiritual body is completely separate from the actual physical body. I think that's something where we borrow a physical body for this world, if you will, and when we pass on, that physical body is done, well, maybe we are not.
Hello, my name is Ben Harl. I'm 49 years old, and this is my personal journey. As a writer, a musician, and a filmmaker, I have to say being an artist is one of the most fulfilling aspects of my life. You know, the feeling of accomplishment that I get from creating something out of nothing really is pretty profound. And then as a husband, a father, a son, and a brother, I can say that there's equal satisfaction and joy to be found in the love that I give and receive from family and friends. But despite all of this, there's always been this little voice in the back of my mind. You know, this voice reminds me that all of this is fleeting, that my life has an expiration date, and that at some point my ability to enjoy all of this is going to go away. Yet with all that being said, I kind of decided that I wanted to reach out to some people who have a particular connection to the subject of the afterlife. You know, people who have found or maybe witnessed something that's helped them quiet that little voice that sometimes gets really loud. And I thought, as a filmmaker, if I'm going to do this, why not capture it and share it with other people? So that's what this documentary is. It's the conversations that I've had with these people that are willing to sit down and discuss their beliefs with someone who's genuinely interested to hear what they have to say. What do you believe happens to us when we die?
We're 8 octillion atoms that are 99.999% empty space. And somehow the consciousness of those atoms, or the consciousness of the universe, organizes these atoms in such a way that we have hearts, we have livers, we have stomachs, we've got eyeballs, we can hear. There's the sun, there's the trees, everything made out of atoms. We're all the same, right? But it's really hard for us to mentally grasp that as human beings, because it's nearly impossible to grasp that intellectually. Hi, my name is Adam Dintz, and I'm a hypnotherapist, Reiki master teacher, sacred rose healer, and I practice a variety of different energy healing modalities. A lot of the clients who come to me wanna experience a past life. Many of those clients who come, they have questions very similar to yours, like what happens to us when we die? And not just what happens to us when we die, they don't wanna just know it, they want to experience it. They want something tangible that they can take home and say, now I've had this experience, and so I now believe that I am more than just this physical body.
There's controversy in terms of the extent to which the brain, for example, continues versus stops right along with the heart. Some people think that when you have a near-death experience, for example, that's a manifestation in which the brain may be continuing beyond the scope of when the heart and lungs and other organs have shut down, but I don't think that's been fully ironed out. So my name is Marcy Claiborne. I'm an internal medicine doctor in Chicago and also the medical director for a private wellness club also in Chicago. So I personally believe that after death we go into sort of a realm that is somewhere between this life and what might be considered the afterlife or the heaven, kind of in a Judeo-Christian way. So I think that there's this in-between period in which there's somewhat of a reckoning, I guess, of the events, of the pain, of the good and the bad that happened in the life preceding that time period. The way in which we make peace with that or don't then determines whether we might move on to a further, again, heaven type of place or true afterlife that's more blissful than that in-between period.
A newspaper editor gives an assignment to a staff writer. He wants 1,000 words on the potential for an afterlife for the Sunday edition. So they set a deadline, and when the deadline arrives, the editor opens up his email, and in there is an attachment. And inside the attachment are the words "nobody knows" typed 500 times. My full name is Benjamin David Watkins. I'm 57 years old. I've worked as a working artist for a lot of my life, and currently I'm employed as an engineering support technician for a Fortune 500 company. We come to this subject from a point of profound ignorance. We are incapable of understanding, in many ways, what happens when we pass, because having an opinion, having an assertion, strong feelings about what happens are all things that are exclusive to living beings. Only living beings, to the best of our knowledge, have thoughts, can have opinions, can have suppositions and assertions regarding what happens, but in reality, we don't know. We have great hopes, we have belief systems that are informed by our prevailing Western mythos, but for the most part, I think we're largely ignorant on the subject. The Lebanese spiritualist poet Khalil Gibran wrote, "You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life?" And like any good meditation, this sort of frames the issue for us beautifully. The mystery of death. That's what we're talking about with the afterlife. We are creatures who are ignorant of what happens next, but there, of course, we have our greatest hopes and desires to go on existing in a meaningful way that is cognizant of what we've done here, but we really don't know. So the mystery of death is all around us, and yet to seek it in the heart of life, what choice do we have?
I wasn't raised necessarily particularly religious, and as a kid, I actually used to go to like Catholic church with my friends, and then I'd go to temple with my Jewish friends, and so I was exposed to a lot of different religions. I actually had a friend from South Africa when I was in 6th grade, and she used to take me to the Baha'i temple. My name is Sandra Subotic. I am a doctor of Eastern Therapies, and I'm the director of Eastern Therapies at a wellness center here in Chicago. I sort of was raised kind of around a lot of religions, and I didn't have one specifically put on me. When I was about 5 years old, right after my grandfather had passed, I remember him coming to me, middle of the day, I was taking a nap, showed up in my room, we had a full-on conversation. I like to say that I've been like this since I was a kid, but when you're a kid, you kind of don't know that everybody doesn't function this way. And then it wasn't until later on when I sort of started exploring these other things and exploring the metaphysical and going to Eastern medicine school that things started amping up, because I started learning different things, and I learned how to meditate, and I learned how to do all of these different things. And so then that started to sort of increase my awareness and my ability to do these things. So yeah, it was never really taught to me. I kind of just have always been that way.
So born and raised Catholic, I've always known heaven and hell. Heaven and hell, it's two places you're going to go depending on how you live your life. As I've matured and as life situations have happened, I still believe there's a heaven and a hell, but I don't know that I believe it's as drastic. My name is Valerie Jordan, and I am the Director of Oncology here at HSHS St. Mary's Hospital. And I've been here for 27 years, started as a therapist and kind of worked my way up to director. So after a patient's diagnosed with cancer, we're blessed that we get to walk the journey with them, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. You know, they've been given a diagnosis that sometimes is fatal for them. Sometimes they know that their life is going to end in, 3 to 6 months. Who knows? Maybe that's the time frame they've given. But the tenacity and the will that they have to fight, and how they allow us in their hearts and in their lives to fight with them is incredible. It inspires me every single day. I truly think that the afterlife is just a state of being. We in this human body, this human suit, have time. We have, a chunk of time where I think God said, here you are, live your life in this chunk of time. And I think that it's all about relationships to me. It's a relationship you have with God or whatever your higher power is. That's all he wants. All he wants is for you to know him and to love him and to accept him. And then I think he promises us that he'll take care of us. What I struggle with, and I'll be honest, is what is that something? My peace of mind for what that is it's no more No more noise, no more nonsense, no more pain, no more ugly that we live every single day.
I used to be very religious growing up, and then I kind of fell out of that. My father passed away, my mother passed away. I had a difficult time with everything. And now I just believe that everything goes black, kind of like the Sopranos episode, you know, at the end of that, everything just goes black. My name is Patrick Harrington, and I am one half of Ghostly Podcast. We debate ghost stories, and we talk about paranormal. I am a skeptic, but I love like those ghost stories. I like creepy paranormal stories, and so that's where I fit in. I do the history, and then I will try to come up with reasons why things happened. I can't always do that, because sometimes science hasn't caught up to these things that are actually happening, but I do my best.
I don't truly believe in death. I think that there is a sadness amongst our egos, and when we lose someone, we're losing all that they fed our ego with. We have just been trained and taught and programmed to fear the idea of passing on, but not necessarily celebrate what all was brought to us through that vessel of person. My name is Frank Whittington. I've been a tattoo artist for the last 22 years, locally in Decatur, Illinois. I take more pride in being an observer of life these days, more so than whatever tattoo people are asking me to do. I strongly believe that it's only the physical body that passes away. I believe we are an energy. We started out as one source. We've developed into multiple human beings experiencing this human life, you know, but we're spirits occupying a body. When the body is finished, we're still spirits occupying a time-space. It's more, I hesitate to say heaven or hell, because I honestly believe those can be created right here in this time space. And I think that there's multiple densities of time space we're working our way through with understanding, and we just keep continuing to redo certain things until we have a better understanding of where we were and where we are.
You know, as I sit here and I contemplate what I've been learning so far, taking part in these interviews and watching these interviews back, is just how sure all of these individuals seem to be about their beliefs. I mean, I know they talk about some of the doubts that they have, but they just all seem so certain and so sure about what they believe when it comes to the afterlife. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of jealous of that. I'm so unsure about what's going to happen to us after we die. I don't have that level of confidence, and I have to imagine that just feels so comforting to have that level of security when it comes to that belief. And I just don't have that. And I like I said, I really wish I did. I'm also really surprised at, you know, how many people from different walks of life all kind of have the same beliefs. I mean, you know, you always hear that, you know, of course, Christians all believe the same things. Atheists all kind of have the same kind of beliefs. People who believe in the paranormal all kind of believe the same thing. But how much of that is interwoven? How much of that, how much of those beliefs from all those different types of systems, how many similarities there are between all of that? It just amazes me. I have to say, I'm really excited to see where this progresses based on what I'm seeing so far, because it seems like it's heading in this really positive direction. All these people are really upbeat, they're really positive, they're really confident, they're really sure about themselves, and they all seem to be genuinely at peace with where they're at. And I'm not at peace with where I'm at. So I'm very much looking forward to this journey that I'm on, you know, continuing this journey, because I want that peace. And I'm hoping that by talking to all of these people, that they're going to let me in on their secret somehow, and I'm going to get to enjoy some of that peace and some of that comfort of knowing an answer to at least some of these questions as I progress. Were you raised in your current belief system, or did you break away from tradition?
I admire people who arrive at one place in life when they are young and impressionable and then find their way to another place based on the things they've experienced, the evidence, the information they've processed. A lot of authors I've read have, of course, changed my view on what is possible for humans to know, what we may experience or what we may understand in the long run in the spiritual sense. The world that you grow up in and whether you're inspired by it often has a lot to do with whether you feel a spiritual component in your existence. I was very fortunate that my mother's mother had a house in Nova Scotia, and the landscape in the maritime provinces of eastern Canada is absolutely stunningly beautiful, and the fog is a large part of your daily existence up there. And when you are shrouded in fog and in silence and the quiet of your own thoughts, I think it precipitates a certain type of thinking and makes you ponder mystery of life a bit more than you might here in the flatlands. When I truly want to have transcendent moments, it's always out somewhere where I can be in the presence of my thoughts and nature. I think we are interactive with nature in nonverbal ways that very few of us really understand or bother to engage in this modern world. We're constantly distracted by shiny things going beep and bling and whatnot. Nothing wrong with that either. I benefit greatly from the technology that allows all of us to have the privilege we do in the modern world, but turning it off and remembering where we came from, I think is important.
I was raised by my father. He was a single dad, and my dad was an atheist. And so I didn't really grow up with a sense of religion or faith in my life. But for whatever reason, there was always a hole. There was always this emptiness in my heart that, and I knew that I needed to figure out what it is. And so at about the age of 16, I started to explore more as I met, getting into high school, and I met people who were really getting more into their own individual faiths. I said, okay, I want to study all of these different religions and figure out what I believe. And so I studied Wicca, which is white magic, witchcraft. I studied Christianity, I studied Judaism. I mean, I spent a lot of time really exploring what my beliefs were. And at 17, I converted to Christianity. Shortly after my dad crossed over, a friend of mine, she says, Adam, you gotta talk to my psychic medium friend. I've been working with him for 15 years and he's brilliant. And I'm like, I don't believe in this stuff, As a Christian, I believe that was of the devil. It was a sin, it was evil, right? I never would have considered talking to a psychic medium. But in the case that I was in with the suffering, with the loss I had felt from my dad, I was willing to try anything. So I called this guy, and we were on the phone for a few minutes, and he said, I'm having a really difficult time connecting with your dad. He said, how long ago did he pass? And I said, oh, it was, just a few days ago. He's like, oh, that's what it is. He says, sometimes when somebody crosses over, they need time to regain their energy and to, because it takes a lot of energy to come through, to be able to be brought in through mediumship. And so he said, why don't you give me a call in a couple weeks and we'll try again. Well, the next day I get a phone call from this guy, and he's in tears crying. And he said, Adam, he goes, your dad came through. And it was the most emotional experience that I've had in my 20 years of being a medium. And he was crying on the phone. That's how much it impacted him. He shared for a good 30 minutes what he remembered from the conversation he had with my dad. And there were some things that were right on point that nobody could have known. Nobody could have known. And there were other things that were like, okay, well, I don't know, that doesn't really sound like my dad, right? Only later to find out, validating it with family members, that all of it was true. And that was the moment that really set me on my course to figure out, well, what really does happen to us when we die?
To go and to sit in church for 1 hour doesn't make me a good person. That doesn't make me Catholic. That doesn't make me Christian. My church is how I live my life every single day. How you treat people, how your relationships are, how you interact, how you're kind, how you give, how you do all of those things that church and the Bible has taught us is church.
There's things about all religions that kind of make sense to me, but I don't necessarily conform in one that I would say is my true religion, and that's what I believe, we go to heaven afterwards or we go to hell afterwards. I kind of believe in the idea of karma and working towards the best person that I can be through my life, and I feel like that will in turn kind of project what will happen afterwards. My name's Nicole Whittington. I have been a nurse for about 6 years now. Most of my work has been in long-term care. I've had a little experience in hospice. Before that, I was a CNA for about 5 years. So overall, I've had a little over 10 years in healthcare. I have had quite a few very spiritual out-of-body experiences that have kind of led me to my viewpoint inside of what I can picture the afterlife as. Most of my experience have been with mushrooms, and that has really kind of opened my mind up to the idea that there is a totally separate reality that we are living in. And it's kind of helped me embrace my love for nature and being one with everything around you and understanding the connection that we have with every single thing in the universe. People in religions kind of have this, I think in the Christian religion anyways, have this physical place that they can talk about and picture, but in my spiritual world, it's very hard to verbalize because you can't compare it to anything on this planet.
So do I think we go to a place like a heaven or a hell? I honestly don't know. I do feel like there is something larger, there is something greater. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It has to go somewhere. My name is Amy Robbins. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I also have a podcast called Life, Death, and the Space Between, which is an exploration about life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. And the podcast stemmed from my own experience connecting with loved ones who have passed. I think what gets very difficult around this is that we try to understand this from what our mind is able to comprehend, right? So we try to think about this as it's a place. I don't think it's like that. And from the people that I've spoken to, it's sort of this vast connection with something bigger where you feel one, it feels universal, you feel love, you feel connected. And that's what I think happens, is that we return to that source, whatever that source is. We've put such a value on not dying that we've made it something that is so scary and something that we don't even talk about in our culture. And I think it's so important because it's a part of it's just a transition. I feel like once you're comfortable talking about it, knowing it, contemplating it, it actually can transform how you live your life. That's the transformative piece of death when I think about it, is, am I living the life that I want to live? And even beyond that, when people who've come back from these near-death experiences, one of the things they report is this concept of a life review. You experience your life in the way others experienced you. So you are kind of walking in the shoes, right? The do unto others concept. But you're actually experiencing it as a soul. So the people you hurt, the people you helped, all of it. And if that's the lens in which we view our life, think of how much that transforms our experiences with one another. Now, I'm not claiming I'm perfect with this. I'm still human, but I do try to use that as a way to inform how I live, because I'm gonna know what that feels like in my life review.
And in each and every one of us, we all have an essence, a spirit. I don't believe that this is all it is that we just die when our body dies. I don't believe that. I believe that through the faith that I have, or most other people have, that there is an afterlife. And it's what you believe it to be. So that, if that helps. My name is Neil Gibbons. I'm the co-founder of Graveside Paranormal. We're an investigative group. I do ghost tours throughout the Chicagoland area. I also do investigations for people in their personal homes, and I also do it in businesses. We also do a podcast that's called Spirits by the Gravesides. We talk about a lot of different things, from anything from spirits to conspiracy theories, all the way to Bigfoot on our podcast. And I've been doing this now for about 7 years full time. My mom was a nun at one time before she became my mom. And actually, my dad was a brother before he became my dad. I grew up as a Catholic, and I do believe that a lot of it was instilled into me, that there is a heaven, there is a hell. Could there possibly be a purgatory, or a limbo as they call it? But as we get older, we start to realize that there's other faiths that are out there that have different thoughts. So you have to be open-minded to try to listen to some of them.
So far, it seems like the people that I'm talking to are so much more open-minded than what I was expecting. Yeah, I mean, my entire life I was kind of brought up in this environment where the expectation was people who had these really solid belief systems were really closed off and closed-minded. I mean, yeah, the people I'm talking to, they're pretty confident in their beliefs, but they're not closed-minded. Everybody that I talk to so far are what I would kind of call seekers of truth. They're looking, they're continuing to look for the answers. Even though they have a pretty firm grasp on what they believe, they're still wanting to look for more answers. And I don't know, I just didn't expect that. I didn't expect to find so many people like-minded, like myself, that were looking for these answers. And so that's kind of a breath of fresh air because it's not what I expected. Maybe we can't know what happens to us after we die because we are limited by our physical bodies. You know, maybe that's the reason why people who do psychedelics, or people who have past life regression hypnosis, or people who meditate, or people who actually have had some kind of a near-death experience, maybe that's the reason why these people have these profound, miraculous experiences, because during that short amount of time, they are untethered from their body, so to speak, and it opens them up to be able to receive things that we in our normal day-to-day just can't receive because we're stuck here and we just can't let it go.
I didn't have any roots as a Christian. I just knew that, okay, if I have Jesus in my life, I know that my name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. When this life's over, I'm in heaven, cool. And in college, I was bombarded with all kinds of philosophy and biology and all this stuff. I remember being in an auditorium, hundreds of people, and this biology teacher saying, I dare any of you to try to tell me about creationism. And I felt like I was constantly being assaulted about what I held in my heart as faith in Jesus. I began to start going, well, why do I believe what I believe? Did I believe just because my dad did, my mom did? So I started doing a lot of soul searching, and what I did was entered probably the darkest season of my life, because I said, you know what? I'm not believing in any of this anymore. It's tough when you experience real joy, real peace, then all of a sudden it's gone. I felt like there was this tiny, tiny thread that wasn't severed, that I was still holding on. I knew in the very depths of my core I was going to turn back because the emptiness I felt. I'm saying I'm walking away from everything, but and in that moment, I'm like, what am I doing?
My mother, who again was raised Catholic, but always has been a spiritual seeking person, she bought at a garage sale a 50-cent glow-in-the-dark 1990s Parker's Brothers vintage Ouija board. And one night in 2019, I was at my parents' home. I was bored after dinner, and I randomly thought, I'm gonna dabble with this Ouija board. I lit a candle, I said a prayer, I welcomed in, whatever ghosts or spirits wanted to speak with me. And I found in that moment that I was actually getting pretty profound responses to my questions. I was getting responses that seemed more powerful and more insightful than what I would be giving from my own subconscious, or from what I would be giving even from my own conscious. And at that point, still didn't do much with it. I went back over the Christmas holidays, dabbled with the board again, and ultimately ended up bringing it back to my apartment in Chicago. And one night, I took the board out, and I had asked a friend, can I ask a question about your life? Because I've kind of run out of things to ask this board. And in the midst of this, and sort of relatively suddenly, the board spelled out, "Ghosts don't like being ghosts." I said, "Do you have a name?" The board spelled out, "I have not one name, but two, Grocery Store Leonard." From that evening on, I guess you could say I made friends with Leonard. Speaking through this Ouija board, I would ask questions, and through these conversations, it was communicated to me through Leonard, my new friend, that there was something, he referred to it as the after. And my understanding again in chatting with Leonard was that kind of to get to the after required, again, like this degree of detachment from this world to make peace with that release from, again, pain and everything that had happened and a reconciling to get there. So it was pretty profound. And I can tell you I'm, well educated. I'm trained in evidence-based science. So this was a crazily unique experience, but it was very, very real. And I actually wrote down pretty verbatim many of the conversations that I had with Leonard in the context of this time.
I was meditating one day and I had this vision, and I saw, like, because you have to, it was Zen Buddhism, so you face the wall. You don't even face like the altar. You face a blank wall. But there was a shadow on the wall, and the shadow was giving me these like I was thinking I was seeing something like Mother Earth giving birth or something like that. And it was really something that hit me. And I waited a couple times, and finally I was there with the monk guy, and I said, I had this vision, and I would love to tell you about it. And I started telling him, and he said, don't worry, that'll pass. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I had this vision. This is a good thing. And he said, don't worry, that'll pass. And then we were we were talking after the meditation, and he was telling a story about this Zen master that before he became a master, he went to his teacher and he said, everything is cloudy today. I don't think there's any way I'm going to achieve enlightenment today. And the Zen master said, don't worry, that'll pass. And then he came back the next day and he said, you know what? The clouds have lifted and I feel completely enlightened. And he said, don't worry, that'll pass. And that right there is the moment that I became an atheist. It all clicked in that all these experiences that I've had are gonna pass. And it's fine, and it's okay.
Do you ever have doubts about your beliefs?
I doubt it all the time, still. And the way that I deal with it is I ask for signs. I ask for help. I ask for guidance. I ask for some sort of concrete evidence that what I'm experiencing is not made up in my head. I come from a science-minded background, like, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? And the more people that I've spoken to, the more I've found that there actually is evidence, and there's lots of people doing research on this. What's the most interesting to me is how many people are outwardly willing to say they don't believe it, but then kind of behind the scenes are like, maybe I need to look into this. Science and spirituality used to be much more intertwined, and over time they've gotten further apart, and now they are coming back together. And then when we think about where we are in terms of science, in terms of psychedelics, when I read about these experiences, so much of what I'm finding mimics these spiritually transformative experiences that people have reported, separate from the substances that are inducing them. So it's so interesting that we're now seeking out these experiences that make us feel more expansive, that make us feel like we are no longer in our bodies, that our consciousness exists and is much greater than that which is confined in this brain. It feels to me like it's coming back together. And so in it coming back together, spirits from the other side are getting closer to us as we are raising our consciousness. Some of us are raising our consciousness. A lot of people are not, but.
I have doubts all the time. Most of my family are skeptics. It runs in our genes. And so the universe constantly surprises me because of the amount of skepticism I had. I remember I had a gentleman call me a few years ago, and he wanted to come in for a Reiki session. And I asked him what was going on. And he said, Adam, he goes, I've never been this depressed in my entire life. He's like, I've tried everything. I've tried every medication. I've gone to talk therapy. This is it. I have no other course of action but to try this, and if this doesn't work, then I don't want to go on anymore. I think I'm gonna kill myself. And so he's like, can you help me? And I was like, I don't think I can help this guy. And I was like, well, why don't you come in? Let's do a Reiki session. Let's see how you feel afterwards. So he came in, we did our intake, And during the intake, he reiterated the same thing. He looked completely lost, completely just, you know, when you look at someone and there's just something going on, it's just as evident as day. And I was scared out of my mind because I didn't want to be the last person that couldn't help this guy. You know, I didn't want to read in the paper or hear something that this gentleman had killed himself after coming and seeing me. And so, nevertheless, went back to the Reiki table, facilitated the healing session, and afterwards, his whole perspective on everything had changed. And about a year later, he took my Reiki 1 class, and he's a Reiki healer now. And his whole life has changed. And so, there's not a day that goes by that I don't have some kind of doubt or skepticism about this stuff. But I'm grateful for it because it gives the universe an opportunity to keep surprising me. And with each surprise I get, I believe more. So the doubt actually helps cement my knowing.
I have doubts about everything. I have doubts about human ability with the apprehension of our 5 senses and the brain function that we have to really understand meaningfully the nature of our current reality, let alone some reality that may exist beyond where we are now. Largely what I mean by that is, if you look back in history, there was a time where everybody knew the world was flat, where everybody knew that disease was God's punishment for having lived a sinful existence, maybe even in a past life. And yet technology constantly chips away at our view of the world and then gives us astounding new views. When von Leeuwenhoek invented the microscope, suddenly the world of microbes was there, and we could notice that a person who was infested with some horrible disease happened to have a microbial profile that was much different from a healthy person. And so we, through our technological evolution, continually unveil the true nature of reality. Our human eyes cannot see infrared, and yet mosquitoes find us in the dark with it. Well, most of us think we're smarter than mosquitoes, but in reality, they have a way of seeing things that we don't. I think that for the most part, we don't really get to experience reality beyond a small sliver that is available to our senses and what we can compute with our brain mass.
I had a lot of doubts about the context of the Holy Bible because I understood, even at a young age, how the game telephone works. I also understood that some words are not translatable from one language to another language, so how could we have one book of context or content written in all these languages, keeping exactly the same vibe throughout, from culture to culture to culture to culture? To me, the plausibility is very little. I think that there's good framework for moral compass value within it, but it gave me a lot of discomfort to make that my only saving grace. If this one book of work is the be all to end all, everyone would have it, own it, trust it, and believe it. But there was too many that I saw them tell me they truly believe everything in here, but they were not living up to that standard. That was really confusing, especially for a child mind, you know what I mean? And we've probably all been there at some point, and that's when I questioned it. But it was questions that never got answers.
But there will try to be times where in my mind, I'll think, well, you sure about that? And I know that there's things out there that could really challenge beliefs. And it's like she talked about earlier about planting seeds. Do I want to put seeds of doubt in something that I don't want to spring up? Of course not. So when a thought of, well, are you sure about that? Or what do you think about that? Is that really what you believe? I just don't even entertain that now because I feel like I've already done that. I've already walked that road and I ended up empty as I could have ever been.
I had this rabbi or bishop, he came up to me at the hospital because my wife was sick and I didn't know what to do. And he kept bothering me, would you like me to say a prayer with you? And at that time, I was nothing but just angry. I let that anger just continually build inside me. But he said, please, let me say a prayer with you. I said, fine. I took his hand and we started both saying a prayer. My hand to God, man. I all of a sudden started getting this overwhelming feeling from this man. Like everything was going to be okay. It was, because that day, those 3 days were very traumatic for me. Because I didn't know what to do. When things like this are out of your control, you feel weak. You do not know what to do. But when all of a sudden this man came up to me, and for that moment in time, I lost a little bit of faith. But for that moment in time after that, he reinstilled that faith in me. Because when I took his hand and he started praying and I started praying, it was an overwhelming feeling that started to overcome me. And that's when I knew everything was going to be okay. And today, my wife, thank God, is still alive.
I gotta say, I'm really not surprised that almost everybody that I talked to, they all said that they had some kind of an experience with the paranormal or the miraculous or the spiritual. You know, in normal everyday settings, generally people don't kind of fess up to having those experiences. Usually, you know, when you ask them, you know, have you ever seen a ghost? You see this shame kind of wash over their face, or confusion wash over their face, or denial, where they just don't want to talk about it. But, you know, if you pry a little bit and you give them a little bit of time, usually within a few minutes, everybody that you talk to, they'll open up and they'll end up telling you about a time that they had experienced a ghost, or maybe a family member had experienced something that they couldn't explain. And honestly, I'm no stranger to that. You know, I've had things that have happened to me throughout my entire life that I just can't explain through conventional means. Being a practicing atheist, or not believing in any kind of an afterlife or any kind of a deity, and then being subjected to these things that I can't explain, wow, that is really hard to kind of marry mentally in my brain, because they're conflicting. But the thing that I like about this journey the most so far is all these people that I've talked to, they've had really good ways to explain to me how you can believe in the afterlife and you can believe in the paranormal and still have that analytical mind and look at it from an analytical perspective or a scientific perspective. And that's something I hadn't really considered before. You know, I always thought that I had to keep that divided. I had to either deny my atheism or deny my analytical thinking process, or I had to deny ghosts, or I had to deny paranormal activity, or I had to deny the possibility of an afterlife. And being able to put those two together and having these people explain to me how some of that process could work, man, what a relief it is.
Have you ever witnessed a death?
I think whenever I was younger, the first time that I went to a visitation and a funeral, it definitely, I'll never forget that first person that I saw. And same thing in nursing, I'll never forget that first person that I had to care for after they died. Because that's a big part of nursing, is you have to clean them up, and you have a little kind of routine that you have to do with the body afterwards. I know a lot of people handle it differently. There's some nurses that the first thing they do is they go into the room and they open up the windows, and they feel like it helps let the spirits out. I've seen, you know, a lot of nurses pray, and a lot of people handle it differently. My way is just kind of putting on my shield and my armor and just going in there and doing it, and trying not to get too emotionally invested in it. But it is, it's really different the first time you have to do it. And I think that you just have to do it so often that it just becomes another part of nursing care.
I've sat with people that are dying, and this is where I find the beauty and the peace of it, honestly. Just to watch someone close their eyes and not open them again is powerful. And to think of, honestly, that chapter in everybody's life that was involved with that person is done. It's closed. And I sat with my grandmother when she died. Again, Catholic family, the most beautiful thing. She had 14 children. All 14 were there when she passed, and they prayed the rosary around her. I believe that people hold on for what they want to hold on to till their last breath. They want to finish the business if they can.
I witness death all the time, every day, and in every way. Death is an intimate part of life. It is the only reason we get to exist. It was a real eye-opener for me to hear Joseph Campbell say that A huge amount of our common mythos among all human cultures is the recognition that other living things must constantly die for us to be alive. This is one of the few hard and fast rules of the universe that you cannot change, which is that you will consume other living things for your entire existence, or you will cease to exist. And I think implied in that is something of a natural debt, that I owe my energy back to this earth from whence I came, so that I can make soil, so that plants can grow from soil, produce oxygen for other living forms. And it is clearly the way that whatever power created this universe wants things to be. If you believe that this natural system evolved organically and that everything that we're a part of happened, or whether that process was begun by a benevolent creator with a stated purpose, either way, you look around the world, biological organisms are meant to interact in symbiotic relationships and create the sustenance of life for each other. And if you believe that that purpose is sacred and that we benefit from it and that we would not exist without it, then when that same intelligence or power or entity says, and by the way, after a certain while, you have to sort of give up the ghost and move on with it, that is the way things are supposed to be. And I accept that. We put telescopes into space and we peer millions of light years across galaxies and the universe, and we see all this matter out there, and the tiniest fraction, a decimal and a countless number of zeros and a 1 after it is what we are. And we sit here and have the privilege of pondering and wondering and looking around with wonderment at everything that made it possible. If this is all we get and there is no afterlife, I'm darn grateful.
I haven't witnessed a death, but when my dad, as I mentioned earlier, when he was in his car accident, I flew out, I went to the Cape, and I was told that my dad's car was at the impound lot and I needed to go, pay the tow company and just give him possession of the car because I knew my dad was never coming out of the hospital. And so I went up and I paid the guy, and he gave me the keys and he said, go get the stuff out of your dad's car, whatever you want to take. He had some stuff in there. So I go over to the car, I open the door and I go inside and I look up and the whole ceiling of the car is covered in blood. And it was still wet. And there was blood that had dripped from the top of the car down onto the seats. And it was just blood everywhere. In 2017, I was diagnosed with PTSD related to loss because of what happened in that experience with my dad. It's potent. It's potent and I can only imagine how traumatic it is to see somebody die. Fortunately, that was also the catalyst, as I mentioned earlier too, which set me on my journey and to learn more about who I am and what I believe spiritually. And it was the catalyst for my awakening, if you will.
I don't know that I've ever witnessed a sudden death, like something being shot in front of me, but having obviously gone to medical school and then residency and spent then time even as an attending working in hospitals, I definitely had multiple experiences in which there were, for example, code blues being called like you see on TV, where emergency situations, someone goes into a cardiac arrest, and I have been part of the team doing the CPR, et cetera, or telling the nurse, give epinephrine now, trying to resuscitate this person. And I have seen many of those cases actually where the patient doesn't make it and you're there present watching death because they can't be resuscitated with CPR. There have been times where you would hold the hand of somebody one morning on rounds and see how they were feeling, make sure they were comfortable, speak with them, have full conversations, maybe check in on them in the afternoon, and come in the next morning and they had passed. When you experience that within the realm of a medical career, you kind of almost learn to sort of separate yourself and shut off what would otherwise be a really powerful, potent, and somewhat traumatizing human experience. For better or worse, in a way, you're like, maybe death should be this bigger thing, but for me it was, we saw a few deaths on Tuesday night, and I think maybe that contributed to why I've never really been afraid of the topic or afraid of the concept of death. It's too profound to be able to have this incredibly meaningful conversation with a person one day and then walk in the next day and their physical body is gone. I kind of knew from that alone there's got to be something more than this. That's too profound otherwise.
One of my first jobs was taking care of this woman who had been going to the clinic for 40 years. And she ended up taking a fall. And I had to go up there, and I brought the woman who ran the school, and she helped out, and we got her set. She went to the hospital, and everything was fine. And then I think it was a couple months later that she started to stop eating. So this had gone on for a couple days, and I was actually sitting next to her when she took her last breath. That was a very intense experience. I think sitting with someone when they take their last breath is hard to explain. I could feel, and I would say almost even see, the soul as it left. You could see it was a very specific transition of what she looked like and what I was experiencing, even sitting in the room, and then what it looked like and what it felt as it was transitioning out. It's kind of hard to put into words, but it was a poignant experience, absolutely.
I witnessed my father's passing, and at that time, I was still blissfully unaware of myself. My dad and I were not terribly close through the early part of my life. We made amends toward the end of his life. A lot of people knew me, knew of me, and had their ideology about me, where I was just going through the motions, being prompted by action, being prompted by praise to do the next thing, to where I was totally disconnected from who I am. But it was his passing there again that kind of gave me that realization, like, you just don't know shit.
One thing that I'm really impressed by when I'm talking to these people is just how well most of them have managed to figure out a way to deal with the death of their loved ones. That's something that I've always struggled with. I mean, we've all had friends, family, loved ones pass on. And so we've all had to deal with it in one way or another, but it's something that I've always been really terrible at dealing with. I've always kind of, pushed it back into the corner of my mind and really kind of lived in a little bit of denial when it came to the death of my loved ones, in particular my mother. My mom died, it's been several years ago, but she died really young, and I was really young when she passed too. So I didn't really handle it very well. I put on a brave face for the rest of my family. I did my best to console them, but I never really allowed myself the opportunity to grieve. And even all these years later, I don't think I've really grieved in a healthy way. And talking to these folks and seeing how they've managed to handle the death of friends and family and loved ones in a healthy way has really inspired me to maybe kind of crack that back open and look at it myself. And, I'm starting to think that maybe facing it head on and dealing with the fear that I have with that and the denial that I have with my friends, family, and loved ones passing on is probably going to answer some of the questions that I have as well. So I think that's one positive that's come out of this, is just learning from these people. And you don't really think too much about, or at least I didn't think too much about how much death we see on an everyday basis in our environment. It's almost like we become desensitized to it unless it happens to us directly. And even then, sometimes we're desensitized to it. And so it's interesting to talk to these people to see how they've managed it, how they deal with it, how they come to terms with it, and how they still move on from a really healthy emotional perspective. So there's a lot to learn here. Is there any aspect of the afterlife that scares you? Is there any aspect that brings you joy?
No, there's no element of the afterlife at all that frightens me. I want to live my life here on the earth plane as long as I can, but I'm very much looking forward to experiencing these things that we try to taste here in our human form. Now, I'll say, even though I'm not afraid of anything in the afterlife, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid of how I'm going to die. And that, to me, is the scariest. I'm not afraid of death. I'm a little bit afraid of, and I think a lot of it is because seeing how my dad died, right? I don't want to die, and I don't want to die that way. That's not how I want to exit. So that's where, if any fear I have, that's really where it is.
I did DMT maybe a year ago, and I've done it one time. It's one of these substances that once you take it, you don't get a craving for it again. You are bombarded with so much truth, so much realization in such a short period of time. It takes a while to sort through it and really ponder on it and meditate on it to figure out what all transpired. There's nothing beyond this life of any kind of pain or discomfort, you know what I mean? That's another, and going back to this being what I consider to be more of like a prison planet, you know what I mean? We're confined to the, you know, the mind, body, spirit complex that we that we live in. So whatever it feels, we feel. Whatever it experiences, we experience. But beyond this, similar to sleeping at night and being unaware of your surroundings while you're in sleep state, I feel that the afterlife is very much like that with conscious awareness.
Whenever I was a Christian, I was a little frightened by the concept of hell and being able to make a mistake that would end your eternity. But now that I have freed my mind of feeling that trap of heaven or hell and having to conform into that certain viewpoint or else, it's definitely taken away my fears. And also having that DMT experience where I feel like I possibly went to that spiritual world where I will go when I die, and having that peace that it's going to be okay, there really isn't any fears. And even if somebody doesn't believe quite like I believe, I don't fear for them when they die. Because I think that everybody's own belief, whatever it is, you know, as long as they're okay and at peace with it when they die, then there's nothing more anybody could have done. So
I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid of that aspect of it. I'm afraid that this life that I have would not be remembered at all. So doing something like this is good. I mean, hopefully people watch it long after I'm gone, and they can take value of anything that I said or just get a good laugh at my stupidity in it. And every minute that I spend not doing something productive or creative, I feel like it's a waste. And I think it has to do with my father dying when I was young. I view time very different than everyone else. To me, I get very impatient about things. I'm like OCD when it comes to time. If I'm supposed to be someplace at 10 o'clock, I'm there at 9:45. And I'll sit in my car and wait. I mean, I do that often. I'll get to a place a half hour early and I'll just wait because I'm like, I don't want to cause anybody else to waste their time. Time just means so much to me. I believe that the people that go before me, my loved ones that have gone before me, are lucky in a way because I believe that they do not have to struggle with the grief of losing me. It's because of how much I've gone through in my life, how many people have died, that I have to find some kind of positive point about them going before me, and it's that they do not have to witness my death.
It's not that, in my belief, that God has to forgive you, or this person has to forgive you for the crime that you did, or the thing that you did to them. It's you. It's you and yourself. So I wondered to myself, can I find that forgiveness? I'm a sensitive, I hear voices in my left ear and I get impressions, okay? And it seems the more and more I do this, the more and more stronger I come to this, and actually I get sick. I always meditate before I go and do these ghost tours. It's very important because you do go through places that are truly haunted and there's attachments. And I was laying there and I always fall asleep. Now in my dream, a young man by the name of Christopher came to me. I believe it was Christopher. And he said to me, when you get to the back end of Bachelor's Grove, please bring up my name. So I wake up and I had this thought in my head and I saw him in my dream. I remembered the description of him completely. And he asked me, please do this. So we're done with the back end of Bachelor's Grove, but I can feel the impression of this young man. It's always in the back of the head. So I'm like, all right, okay, I'm gonna do this. I know I'm gonna look nuts, but I'm gonna do this. Because I truly believe that someone is talking to me. So I raised my hand and I said, listen, this is the end of this part. I go, but I want everybody to pay attention to this. There is a young man that's here with me at this time. His name is Christopher. He recently passed, I don't know how long ago, but there's someone here that knows him. I'm going to give you a description of him. I gave the full physical description, hat, sideburns, and one guy raised his hand. He said, he goes, that's my cousin, Christopher. And I said, oh my God, that's the name of the guy. It actually made me feel good that I was able to reach out to people, and I've done it before, and I recently just did last week as well. It's good to know that sometimes people feel good after that. And that's the main thing, is that they feel good. You know, and I feel good knowing that, you know, maybe something good happened with them. So it's not like I can do it like that. It just happens when it happens. So it made me feel good.
So I'm at the airport today, enjoying a flight delay of all things. And you know, anytime I find myself in a situation like this where I have a couple of hours, it gives me the opportunity to kind of sit back and reflect on a lot of the things that I've learned on this journey so far. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize, you know, at first I thought a lot of these folks that I've been talking to were really sure about their answers. And they are sure about some of their answers, of course, but they have a lot of questions the same way that I have a lot of questions. And so my initial thought that these folks kind of had all of the answers is not the case. So I don't feel as reassured as I did originally. You know, when I first started doing this and I first started talking to some of these folks, I started feeling a lot more comfortable, and some of that anxiety started going away. Now, as I sit and I think about it, some of my anxiety is starting to return. Now I'm starting to sleep poorly at night again while I lay back and think about this stuff, because I'm not really getting the answers that I wanted. I am, but I'm not. So it's kind of twofold. You know, it's that old adage where every question that gets answered gives rise to 5 more questions that you end up having. And so what's happened through this is some of the initial questions that I wanted answered have been answered, but it's bred so many more questions, which has created so many more doubts, and which has created so much more anxiety for me when it comes to trying to find an answer to all of this. And so I don't really feel as comfortable now as I did when I first started this. And that's kind of difficult to deal with. And I'm hoping, you know, as I progress through this and as I reflect more, I'm still hoping that maybe I'm going to find those more answers than new questions. But maybe that's not what it's about. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's about the journey. Maybe it's not about the result. And if that's the case, that's something that I'm going to have to come to terms with.
People that I love, anyone that I've ever met that maybe has shoved God away, that are like, I don't have nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
That they won't be there. And what pains my heart is generally it's a misunderstanding of who they think God is. That, well, I got to stop this, I got to quit this, I got to be like this, I got to wear that, I've got to, and they think it's this book of don'ts, and they've stiff-armed God because they think of all these things that they can't do anymore. They've missed the point. And if they miss the point for those reasons, and they've missed out on eternity because of that, that breaks my heart.
Probably the unknown. You know, the what is it, and the am I good enough to go where I'm supposed to go? Have I lived my life the way I should to be able to go where I'm supposed to go? And will my people be there? Will they know me? Will I know them? Or will it all be just new friends that we meet?
No, nothing of the afterlife that scares me. Even though I believe that there's an afterlife, I'm not ready to be dead in this life. You know, I still have a lot of living to do. I don't want to lose people that I love, even knowing what I know, right? I mean, that thought is still very difficult for me. I know I would be okay. I know they would be okay. I wouldn't question that. I know that eventually I would get back to this place of really believing that there is an afterlife. It just might take me some time and some journeying to get through the grief to do that. But yeah, there's something to me that seems so freeing. Like anytime I've done any experiences, breath experiences where where I don't feel like I'm in my physical body anymore, I'm conscious of how restrictive that feels and how bummed I am that I have to be back in this body, kind of constrained again. Because when you feel that expansive energy, to me, it just seems like amazing to be able to be that big and connected with with everything that is. So I think that it sounds exciting. I just feel like I won't remember it in the way that we're speaking about it, because it's just sort of this consciousness versus being in my brain.
Fearing an afterlife that may or may not exist is a form of self-imposed tyranny. When I look at the natural world, a million forms of symbiosis, a pollinator for every flower, a bioculture that lives in the alimentary system of every complex organism that allows it to digest other organisms. All this stuff planned out. If you look around this world and you see everything that was provided to us so that we can live in a planet that, compared to what we see through the telescope, is paradise for humans. If you look at that world and imagine it to be governed by a creature or an entity or an intelligence that can't wait to torture us for the ways that our behavior did not live up to expectations while we were here, I think you're subjecting yourself to a lot of fear and stress and anxiety over something that may or may not exist.
I think we grow up like in childhood with traditional religion and sort of our fairy tale concept of spirituality as a child, thinking maybe that when you die you go to heaven, or that it's just this like blissful entity, hard to explain, but you know, a grandparent would pass and oh, they're in heaven now. And I think what I've come to learn and personally believe is that it's a bit more complicated than that. The concept that there is something that comes after this is in and of itself very comforting. Even if there is a limbo land, or even if there is a world where we haven't completely gotten rid of all of the challenges, there is something that we have the opportunity to transcend to that is beautiful and peaceful and, you know, what we ultimately would consider, like I said, almost like heaven.
One thing that has completely baffled me throughout this entire journey is just how it seems that there are so many people that I've talked to that just don't seem to have a fear of death or a fear of what's going to happen to them after they die. And that thought just doesn't make sense in my brain. I have spent every day of my life, ever since I was a little kid, going to my great-grandmother's funeral and then watching other friends and loved ones pass throughout my entire life. I've been scared of the thought of what's going to happen to me after I die every single day. And to see people not let that have an emotional and a psychological effect on them, it doesn't even compute. I don't understand how that doesn't trigger fear in them. It's a complete foreign idea to me to think that you can see your demise coming and not really have any fear of it. One of the things that I did do during this journey to try to help, I guess, alleviate some of that fear is I asked Adam Dentz to do a past life regression hypnosis therapy session on me. I saw things during that I really cannot explain, that seemed paranormal or miraculous or spiritual in nature that I wasn't expecting. It's the first time I've ever been hypnotized, so I didn't know what to expect. But I also went into it with a completely open mind. And I have to say, at first, it scared the hell out of me. I'm not gonna lie, it really scared me. But then after I've had time to think about it, it started comforting me a little bit, because I was like, okay, well, maybe this is the proof that I was looking for. Maybe this is what I needed, you know, to see that I had maybe had previous lives, and then seeing that and bearing witness to that. I mean, it shook me, and then it comforted me. Then it made me anxious again. And I think the reason why is because without the hypnosis session, I have no memory of any of that. So if I did indeed live these past lives, and these memories and these things that I saw were visions of lives I've lived previously, the fact that I can't recall that on just whenever I want, it creates a whole other set of anxiety for me, because to me that's almost the same as being an atheist. If I don't get to remember these past lives, what good are they? I mean, that's the question that I have, you know, and the thought that we all kind of blend into this ultimate universal consciousness is another thing that I don't know if I'm really comfortable with or not either, because you know, we as human beings, we're ego-driven, we're ego-based. We are very conscious of ourselves, our sense of self. And the thought that we would, after we die, become something greater and lose ourselves and our ego and what makes us us, lose that into some kind of a general consciousness, permanently, temporarily, whatever the case is, until we get an opportunity to get born into another life, and then we don't remember anything from our previous lives. It almost feels sometimes like that may be worse than nothing, because either way, I'm disappearing. And I just, man, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm hoping that over the course of the next several weeks and several months, as I have more time to reflect on this, I'm hoping that I'll start to get some more comfort. And to be honest with you, I'll probably do some more spiritual things like the past life regression hypnosis in the future, maybe do some Reiki healing sessions, maybe even some more unorthodox treatments, so to speak, to try to find, some inner consciousness, or try to find my spirituality, or try to gather more information on previous lives that I may have lived. Maybe if I find more proof, or if I see more things, or when I find out more, maybe I'll start gathering some of that initial comfort that I had at first. And maybe we don't disappear into the general consciousness. Maybe we do get to keep our sense of selves, or our ego. And if that's the case, I sure hope so, because the thought of disappearing is probably the part of dying or the afterlife that scares me the most.
What message do you have for the people that will view this documentary? What's the takeaway?
Your truth may not align with anybody else's truth. You're not meant to walk in anybody else's shadow. You're not meant to believe the same thing your parents believed. You don't have to believe the same thing your parents believed. You can have very similar beliefs, but be slightly different. It doesn't matter, because we're all always where we're supposed to be. We're all continuously unfolding as the laws of the universe dictate.
You don't have to plant a flag in on the moon and say, this is ours, right? This is what it has to be. But when you're open and you're curious, the world becomes much more interesting. Things just seem magical. And then life becomes more interesting and amazing.
Typically, throughout human existence, there have been things that are viewed as mystical, miraculous, outside of the realm of nature. And then within a certain amount of time, someone comes along and says, no, that lightning isn't an angry deity throwing bolts at you because you failed in your human endeavors, but rather is a discharge between the atmosphere and the ground of the earth. We constantly use science and technology to expand the limits of what humans can understand. And as we do that, a certain amount of what used to be mysterious and attributed to some unknown power suddenly is something that we can understand in fairly concise terms. My energy will get restless in this body, and this body will fail me. And at a certain point, that energy may disperse into the cosmic background. To me, faith means understanding that the powers that made all this possible have that intent, that this body is supposed to fall away from me. And if there is some shadow or harmonic or echo of the part of me that embodied this flesh and walked around self-aware in a state of animation, if all that goes away, but the energy gets to contribute to the system that made this happen, I need to be fine with that and need to understand that that is clearly the way things are supposed to be according to the powers that made all this possible.
Learning to tap in to your personal self-awareness will catapult you into your spiritual journey. Being blissfully aware that the ego really doesn't matter. It doesn't give matter to your life other than as a means of protection. And when people are capable and aware of themselves enough to be able to let go and tap into their own personal magic of this life, I think it's going to be essential in the development of humanity.
There is more than this concrete world that we see every day. I think we're a part of something bigger. I think our soul is a part of something bigger, and that alone is pretty profound and uplifting. And the other thing I would say is, I think the openness to be able to get there requires us to, in some ways, step away from the scientific and logical side of ourselves. You know, being a doctor by nature and having to be very logical in my daily life, in order for me to get to this more spiritual realm, I have had to accept that logic can't explain everything, that there's something beyond logic that energetically can help to explain the afterlife, can help to guide us in a spiritual realm, and can even explain a lot of the things that we don't otherwise have answers to in this world.
No matter what problems you have in life, either it be drugs, alcohol, or depression, or whatever it is, it's not the faith of the religion that you believe in, but believing yourself. It starts with self. And I know there's a lot of people out there, believe me, who lose this or may not have it. But take that one little moment in time and just listen to yourself and find that faith within you. And hopefully you can help yourself.
My main takeaway would be just to be able to find peace in not knowing. Understanding that we don't have anything on this planet that's ever going to write out what the correct answer is. No matter how much soul searching you do, at the end of the day, you just have to be okay with whatever you have come up with, and you have to be at peace with it. And that's not an easy, it's easier said than done. But if you can try and achieve that, that would be my takeaway.
Believe what is good for you. And I know that that is a really difficult thing to say, because most of the time people believe things because they're told to believe things. But question all those things that you're told and believe what works for you. I struggle with people that have made these big accomplishments and then say, you know, I would like to thank God for this, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do this. And it's like, no, you made this accomplishment. You can be proud of yourself for just one moment. And that is something that I think, even if you want to thank God for something, at least be proud of yourself too.
We as human beings carry around a lot of criticism and baggage and weight that is not always necessary. I think that most of us are really, really hard on ourselves. Of course, you want to try and be the best person that you can be. Of course, you want to try and work through your things. And I think it's really important to take time and enjoy your life, and maybe not be so hard on yourself and not so hard on others. Hopefully people watching this documentary can maybe step out of whatever fear or apprehension they do have of the afterlife. That would be my biggest hope.
God's given us the choice to believe in Him or not believe in Him. So if you're looking for that one thing that's going to make it all make sense, it's not going to happen. You're not going to find, like, looking like, oh, I found this book, it all makes sense now. Or because there is an element of faith. Stop trying to figure it all out and just cross that line of faith and say, I had to at one point in my life say, you know what, I can't figure this all out.
Find joy in the everyday simple things, because it's the simple things that make the memories. Sure, the grand vacations and all of those are wonderful, but it's the relationships, and it's the how we treat and talk to each other every day. Just be the best person you can and live life to the fullest, honestly, because we don't know when our last breath is. We don't know. So make the best of every moment you have.
I think it's really important for all of us, regardless of our upbringing and regardless of what our current beliefs are, for all of us to reach out to people that have different spiritual beliefs, people from different cultures, people from different backgrounds, and ask them about their beliefs, ask them about their cultures. I think you'd be surprised at how many similarities there are between all of us across the world, regardless of where we come from, regardless of our upbringing, regardless of our religious beliefs, regardless of our spirituality. We all have this common thread of humanity, and there's so much to learn from these different cultures. So don't be scared to reach out and ask people questions. These people want to talk about their culture. They want to talk about their beliefs. They want to talk about what makes them tick. And you would be amazed at how much information from other cultures and belief systems can help you either come to terms with things that you're combating in your own belief systems or things that you're questioning about your own life, you'd really, really be amazed at how much of a difference talking to other people from different walks of life can have. And don't be afraid to tell your story. That's another lesson that I hope everybody gathers from this. We all have things that we can share that have the potential to influence and have a very positive effect on other people around us, sometimes without us even realizing it. These are the lessons that I've learned, and I think these are the lessons that all of us could learn.